So, as promised, a full-length feature version of the bumper car update. And don't worry, no, it's not like a 2.5 hour epic. It's just longer than a minute. World's fastest bumper car update. Looking at some of the things we've been up to in more detail. Interesting stuff like leveling out the motor so we can look at mounting situation. Additional body mods for more clearance. And many of the updates will be in upright format, millennial friendly, just for our younger viewers. Are there any? I think everyone's about my age. If you're under the age of 50 and watching this video, please leave a comment down here somewhere, just so that we know, and give the video the thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Anyway, let's get on with it. As you may be aware, we got the all-important steel tubing for the chassis, and work on that will begin very shortly. But here's some initial ponderings on that situation. Yes, we have raised the C-frame, the approximate height that it will travel above the ground. That is 3.5 to 4 inches. The main ladder chassis may well be at least 2 inches lower, i.e. go underneath the top lip of the C-frame. That was the original idea. And I think a lot of that positioning of the chassis versus the C-frame and the body will depend largely on the ride height of the vehicle, where the axles sit in relation to the motor, etc., etc. Over or under, that is the question. And that, of course, is not a cinder block nor a breeze block. No, it's an engine block. Obviously, it's going to be wider, but that's how far it's going to come back, roughly. Which is going to be cozy, because it's probably going to meet the seat. Pretty much. And making prototype brackets. And obviously, we'll be using something slightly more sturdy than a chopstick to hold the engine into the frame, into the chassis. But I'm not sure whether this kind of thing, i.e. a bracket that sits on top of the chassis, is better than a straightforward kind of bolt through the chassis for the mount itself. So if any of you are engineering types and have an opinion that is worthwhile, do let me know. Otherwise, I shall just be making random decisions as per normal, based on hunches. Yes, more measuring for the rear axle and the equivalent front end. These are the rear axle mounts, and as you can see, to the center is 1¼ inches. Of course, we can space this out with spacer in here if we need to drop it any lower than that, which we might want to do, because that would give us clearance of 3.25, I think, on the C-frame, marked in orange there. But that might be enough. And the rear end is fairly simple, because those will literally just bolt to the chassis rails themselves, as you can see in Mr. Furz's diagram too. The front end gets a little bit more complicated. Yes, I'm still doing my arm exercises, because these knuckles are designed to mount to a vertical face, i.e. inside or on the outside of the chassis arm itself, or indeed an extension thereof, which is what we're looking at there, that light blue shaded. So of course we can adjust that to any height that we want to compensate for any difference in the rear end. Although if that is 1/4 inch higher at the rear end, that will give us kind of a tilt on the whole thing, back to front, so it's lower at the front slightly, a little bit like a drag car. Probably not a bad thing, because weight distribution wise, we're basically gonna have, I don't know, let's say 50 pounds for the motor here, and getting on for 200 pounds of passenger, for want of a better word, supposedly driver, here. So the potential for wheelies is fairly high, I'm guessing. Might even want to throw some spacers in here to lift the back end up some more. always being mindful of scraping the front end on the ground. Obviously we're not going to get ridiculous with that, but at the same time we want to put some air scoop underneath that, probably to bring more air onto the radiator. We've got our little doofers there and our main air intake. Looks something like that. Bit worried about the weight distribution, even if it is very much a mid-engine vehicle. Just drilling out some holes here in readiness for the jigsaw to slot the chassis into. Not bad for a start. Yes, folks, it's rarely happening. Corresponding grooves in the bodywork itself, and bringing up the rear, we have left off. Well, it may not seem to be very exciting, but it is, because it's now sitting on its chassis rails. How about that? That's pretty cool. I'm impressed. We're getting somewhere. Yeah. And the ride height's a little higher than it might be when it comes down to it, but close enough. 5 inches to be precise. Simple but sweet solution for the chassis to secure to the C-frame is getting a nice big nut like that, which actually then fits inside and basically jams against the side of the chassis rail, the inside of the chassis rail, and then we can just bolt it up. Now we've got our main chassis rails in, which may require modification at some point. We're looking at just kind of mounting stuff, so front wheels. This is almost parallel with this. So again, that was part of the 11-inch measurement. So those brackets would kind of come off down to there from the main chassis, something like that. Yeah, and something else has cropped up actually, just looking at this, because it's on a breeze block, as you can see at the moment, which gives it a ride height of 5 inches as opposed to the 3.5 or whatever that we think we're going to get. But the interesting thing is that, as you can see, the top of the tyre is not even, maybe half an inch above the C-frame at that level. So if we were to sacrifice ride height, we could potentially get an extraordinary amount of extra width, track width, on the front by tucking it inside the C-frame, i.e. getting rid of all that and poking it through. So for argument's sake, let's say that inside track is currently 17 inches and the outside of the wheel's something like 27, right? Potentially extend that to something ridiculous like 34 or 35 inches. That there, 27 inches, 35 inches, as opposed to the existing 27 that we've managed to squeeze inside the C-frame. Yeah, that would be interesting. So again, questions for you all. Please do leave comments. Do we sacrifice ride height for extra track stability? I don't know. Anyway, meantime, let's get some measurements. That's 5 inches to the top of the frame to the bottom of the front axle mount. Knuckle joint or something, I think they're called. Yeah, okay. And what I'm thinking for that is, I'll just borrow this, is a similar kind of device as we're using over there. That fits over the frame like so, and then extends obviously down, so the whole thing will be scaled up. And actually looking at that, rear engine mount, which is inset by quite a lot compared to the motor itself, as you can see. I'm hoping we can get a crossbar in, something like that, that ties those two main chassis rails together in a ladder fashion, and then mounts that actually onto the cross brace as well. That'll be the most secure, I think. Then of course there's the whole issue of steering the damn thing. And that's done from these points here. And that main tie rod that I'm using actually as the main one from the kit was the steering one, so it's half the length. So that would normally kind of sit like that and then come up towards the steering wheel. Problem is, that's right where the motor's going to be. So, thanks to my buddy Kurt, he suggested reins. Yes, the thing is, reins are generally used for horses, and they generally don't do 125 miles an hour. They also shy at plastic bags in a hedge and throw you off. All that aside, I don't fancy steering this with rods and two little handles, and that brings up another issue of controls in general. First of all, gear shift, which is located on the left-hand side, as per most motorcycles that I'm aware of. And we're debating doing some kind of hand shifting on that, bringing it back that way, rather than forward to a foot position over here somewhere. Now, whether we're going with handlebars or a steering wheel, I'm not sure yet. We're undecided because this whole steering thing's a bit of an issue. But traditionally, on the left-hand side is your clutch lever. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to get a gear shift in there with the same hand. Tricky, okay. Problem number one. If we put it on the other side, of course, that traditionally is your throttle and your brake. Of course, these can all be adapted to be controlled by some other device. You can have thumb-controlled throttles. We can, of course, potentially use pedals, but it's rather a question of where the feet are going to go at this point in time as well. Yes, if you haven't watched that mini upside-down episode, there's my beautiful seat, or part of it. So, looking at it now it's actually sitting on the chassis, although it's higher than it will be compared to the wheels. There is the possibility that my feet could go forward of the wheels, which I was beginning to think they couldn't. Bearing in mind these are going to be revolving at 3,800 and something whatever revolutions a minute. So we could have some kind of pedals down there, I suppose, whether it's gear change or throttles or whatever. One down, free to go. Next up, my favourite, yes, those rivet things, and yeah, some wooden braces for a seat, of course. Just so happens I have these two bits that I pre-cut to that size, which actually were for some kind of AC vent like that. Anyway, they are going to fit beautifully just there. And then that raises, that gives the platform just the right height for the seat to arrive where we want it to see, which is where where it was just now. So that's about the progress leading up to the new year, in fact, and lots of questions for you to chip in with. As you can see, I've had a little bit of a tidy up, done a little bit of decorating just to make the place a little bit brighter. This is the year we get that in that and start doing some motoring. So thanks as always for your continued support and viewing. Stay tuned for all the shorts that will be just little updates on progress. There might be a few repeats as far as this goes. Millennial friends catch up with those bite-sized videos. If you haven't already, please subscribe down there somewhere, and of course encourage others to watch my lunacy.